My name is Madeline Larson, and I'll never forget the day Lucas Caldwell called me excess baggage in front of 42 people, his voice dripping with the kind of arrogance you only get from a trust fund and a corner office you didn't earn. I was standing at the head of a conference room in Chicago's Loop, the skyline glittering through the glass behind me, presenting my quarterly logistics report. 12 years I'd spent building the supply chain for Sterling Corp., turning chaos into clockwork, and there I was, mid-slide, when Lucas sauntered in late, of course, sipping a kale smoothie, his tailored blazer screaming, "I summer in the Hamptons." He leaned against the projector screen, smirked, and said, "Why are we still dragging along excess baggage like this? It's slowing us down." The room froze. The hum of the AC felt louder than my heartbeat. No one laughed, but no one defended me either. My team, the people I'd mentored through late nights and 3 corporate restructurings, stared at their laptops like they'd just witnessed a car crash. I'm not the kind of woman who cries in public. Growing up in a South Side Chicago duplex, where my dad drove trucks for a living and my mom balanced the books for a corner store, I learned to keep my chin up. Dad died of a heart attack when I was 25, right as I landed my first logistics job. I swore I'd make him proud, mapping routes and streamlining freight like he used to dream about. When Mom passed last year, she left me a small inheritance, her life savings, tucked away in a credit union. That money was supposed to be my safety net, but it became my weapon. Lucas didn't know any of that. He didn't know I'd brokered a $10 million merger during a global crisis, or that I'd sat by my father's hospital bed, signing contracts with one hand while holding his with the other. To him, I was just a line item to cut. Lucas was the CEO's son, a 30-year-old Stanford grad with a resume polished by his father's assistants. Rumor had it his last gig, a startup that crashed in 6 months, ended after he borrowed a pitch from some dropshipping guru on YouTube. Now he was Sterling Corp's transformation consultant, a title that meant he could ruin lives without the liability of being CEO. His dad, Richard Caldwell, owned the company, but I was the one who'd bled for it. That day, as Lucas's words hung in the air, I felt my dignity burn, but something else sparked too, anger, sharp and cold. I closed my PowerPoint, nodded to my team, and walked out before my face could betray me. In the bathroom, I locked the door, sat on the edge of the sink, and counted the tiles, 17, same as the years I'd been in this industry. This wasn't just a job. It was a declaration of war, and I wasn't about to surrender. Back at my desk, a yellow post-it stuck to my monitor like a warning flare. Lucas wants to see you at 3 p.m. My stomach churned, but I wasn't surprised. I texted my husband, Tom, a high school teacher who's my rock in this corporate jungle. "It's happening." He replied, "Got the whiskey ready? Or should I grab the pitchfork?" I smiled despite myself. Tom's humor, his steady presence, kept me grounded when the world felt like it was spinning out of control. But as I walked into that glass-walled conference room at 3 o'clock sharp, I felt like I was stepping into a lion's den with nothing but my pride. Lucas sat there, flanked by 2 HR reps, one with a smile so fake it could have been a stock photo. "Madeline," he said, like we were buddies catching up over coffee, "you've been a solid asset, but we're pivoting leaner, faster. Think of this as a fresh start." He slid a glossy folder across the table, thick with the kind of paperwork that screams exit strategy. I opened it. 6 months severance, bonuses intact, stock options untouched. It was generous, too generous. I squinted at him. "You want me gone quietly?" He grinned, all teeth and no soul. "I want you to land softly, Madeline. No hard feelings." It wasn't kindness, it was a muzzle. But I played along, signed the papers with a steady hand, and shook his hand, my smile tighter than a drum. I walked out like I was headed to a yoga class, but inside, I was a furnace of rage and resolve. That night, at our cozy Evanston apartment, I uncorked a bottle of Malbec older than Lucas's LinkedIn profile and pulled a folder from the back of my closet. It wasn't just any folder, it was my ace in the hole. For 6 months, I'd been in secret talks with Peak Pulse Logistics, the supplier that kept Sterling Corp's freight moving. Their founder, Vince Marino, was navigating a messy divorce and needed liquidity. Last fall, I'd flown to Indianapolis, sat across from him in a diner that smelled of burnt coffee, and walked away with a handshake and a napkin scrawled with terms. I'd signed an NDA so tight it could have choked a lawyer. Lucas didn't know any of this. He thought his severance would buy my silence, but he'd just handed me the keys to his downfall. As I sipped my wine, I felt a flicker of something dangerous, not just anger, but power. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to rewrite the game. Sunday night, I didn't sleep. Adrenaline buzzed through me like a live wire as I watched Lake Michigan's waves crash against the shore from my apartment window. I ran numbers, margins, projections, risks until my laptop glowed like a beacon in the dark. Lucas's severance, my mother's inheritance, and a high-risk loan from a trust fund I'd sworn never to touch were my arsenal. By 7 a.m., I was in a cab heading to an industrial park outside Chicago, where Peak Pulse Logistics operated from a no-frills office that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. Vince Marino met me in a break room with a flickering vending machine and a coffee maker that wheezed like it was on its last legs. He was grizzled, in a flannel shirt and work boots, like he'd just stepped off a loading dock. "You sure you want this mess?" he asked, sipping coffee that smelled like regret. "This place has been bleeding me dry since the recession." I smiled, my nerves humming, but my voice steady. "I've spent my career untangling messes, Vince. This is just a bigger knot." He chuckled, then slid a folder across the table. 51%, yours if the wire clears. I transferred the funds, severance, inheritance, and that trust fund I'd promised Mom I'd save for a rainy day. This wasn't rain, it was a monsoon. By noon, I was the majority owner of Peak Pulse. By 1:30, I was interim chair, drafting a letter that would hit Sterling Corp like a freight train. An 18% rate hike, a pause on priority scheduling due to operational realignment, all polite, all lethal. Lucas wouldn't see it coming. He probably didn't even know Peak Pulse by name. That's what procurement teams were for. But he'd feel the squeeze when his warehouses stalled. As I typed, my heart raced, not just with triumph, but with doubt. What if I'd overplayed my hand? I'd poured everything into this, my savings, my legacy, my future. If it backfired, I'd lose more than a job. I thought of Dad, mapping truck routes on a napkin at our kitchen table, his calloused hands steady even when the world wasn't. I'd done this for him, for me, for every late night I'd spent proving I belonged. But as I hit send on that letter, a text buzzed my phone. Unknown number, Chicago area code. "Nice move, Madeline. We need to talk." V. My stomach twisted. Vivian Caldwell, Lucas's mother, the woman who'd built Sterling Corp's brand before her ex-husband pushed her out. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since she'd pulled me aside at a conference and said, "You're better than they think, Madeline. Don't let them forget it." Why was she reaching out now? And how did she know? Vivian's text sat on my phone like a loaded gun. I didn't reply, not yet. Instead, I walked along Lake Michigan shore, the wind biting my face as I tried to make sense of her reappearance. Vivian Caldwell was a legend at Sterling Corp, the marketing genius who'd turned a mid-tier logistics firm into a household name before her messy divorce from Richard, the CEO. She'd vanished after a rumored buyout, leaving only whispers of her ruthlessness. Employees called her the silk sledgehammer because her cuts were smooth but brutal. Why was she contacting me now, right after I'd pulled the trigger on Peak Pulse? My mind churned, part curiosity, part dread. I wanted to trust her, but trusting a Caldwell felt like petting a wolf. The next evening, I walked into the Sterling Room, a Chicago steakhouse where deals were carved up over $200 ribeyes. Vivian was already there, swirling a glass of Bordeaux, her silver blonde hair gleaming under the chandelier light. She looked like she'd aged backward, her eyes sharp as ever. I slid into the booth, my heart pounding, but my face calm. Without a word, she pushed an envelope across the table. Inside were 3 photos, Lucas shaking hands with Vince Marino, a stock transfer draft dated weeks before my buyout, and an email chain between Lucas and Peak Pulse CFO, plotting a partial acquisition. "He tried to beat you to Peak Pulse," Vivian said, her voice smooth as smoke. "But he's too cocky to check the swing shares. You blocked his plan." I swallowed, my throat dry. He wanted the supply chain to gut it, inflate the stock, and cash out? She nodded. His transformation is a scam. He'd leave Sterling Corp a husk in 2 years. I leaned back, my mind racing. And you? What's your angle? Her smile was cold. I want in. 5% of Peak Pulse silent. I feed you intel, you make the moves. In 6 months, Lucas is out and he'll regret crossing us both. Her words hit like a punch. She hated her son, her own flesh and blood, more than I did. For a moment, I saw the pain behind her eyes, the years of betrayal by her ex-husband, the son who'd chosen his father's side. But could I trust her? I sipped my water, stalling. Vivian's offer was tempting, but it came with strings. I thought of Tom, waiting at home, probably grading papers with a beer in hand, believing in me when I doubted myself. I thought of Amelia, my deputy, who'd texted me that morning. You've got this, Madeline. We're behind you. Their faith anchored me, but Vivian's game was bigger, darker. Why me? I asked. She leaned forward. Because you're smarter than they know, and I'm done hiding. I left the restaurant with her envelope in my purse and a choice to make. Partnering with Vivian could bury Lucas, but it might bury me too. As I drove home, Chicago's lights blurring past, I felt both powerful and trapped, a queen in a chess game I didn't fully understand. 3 days later, Lucas hit back, and it felt like a sledgehammer. An email landed in my inbox from Sterling Corp's legal team. Urgent. Peak Pulse vendor suspension. They claimed quality assurance discrepancies and froze all contracts, halting payments and rerouting communication through their lawyers. It was a corporate chokehold, designed to stall my new contracts and paint me as the villain. I sat at my desk in Peak Pulse's dingy office, staring at the screen, my pulse racing. Lucas wasn't just fighting, he was trying to bury me. I could almost see his smirk, that kale smoothie confidence, thinking he'd outmaneuvered me. But he didn't know I'd already rerouted half his shipments through shell vendors I controlled. His suspension was a paper tiger, but the optics were deadly. The whispers started by noon. Amelia, my deputy, forwarded a panicked text from a Sterling Corp analyst. Is it true you're tanking their freight? People are freaking out. My phone buzzed with calls from warehouse managers, even a junior driver I'd trained years ago, begging me not to screw the team. Lucas was weaponizing fear, turning the company against me, painting me as the rogue ex-employee out for revenge. I paced the office, my boots echoing on the cracked linoleum, feeling the weight of every choice I'd made. I'd poured my life into this, mom's inheritance, dad's dreams, my own grit. If Lucas won the narrative, I'd lose more than Peak Pulse. I'd lose the trust of the people I'd fought for. That night, Vivian called. He's paranoid, not smart, she said, her voice flat through the phone. He'll spin this as your meltdown. Say you're unhinged, emotional. I gripped my wine glass, staring out at Chicago's skyline from my apartment. A storm was rolling in, lightning flickering over Lake Michigan. He's got nothing on me, I said, but my voice wavered. Vivian's tone sharpened. Then hit him where it hurts, his ego. Humiliate him in front of the board. I didn't respond, but her words lit a fire. Lucas could navigate lawsuits, but not shame. I thought of Dad, his hands steady on the wheel through every storm, and I knew I couldn't let fear stop me. The next morning, I called Laura Bennett, CEO of Horizon Freight, one of Sterling Corp's biggest clients. Laura and I had bonded years ago over bad coffee at a logistics expo. Lucas had crossed her once, mocking her company's outdated fleet at a conference. I met her at a diner near O'Hare, sliding a folder across the table. Peak Pulse new rates, 12% lower than Sterling Corp's, with guaranteed delivery windows. Laura raised an eyebrow. He stepped on your neck, didn't he? I nodded. I'm offering you the chance to step back. She signed by lunch. By Friday, Sterling Corp's logistics team was in chaos, an intern leaked email screaming Horizon's pulling out. Who approved this? Lucas was unraveling, and I was just warming up. But as I drove home, my victory felt hollow. Vivian's voice echoed in my head, and I wondered if I was winning her war, not mine. The tide was turning, but I wasn't naive enough to think Lucas would go down quietly. By Monday, my inbox was flooded with messages from Peakpulse clients, some curious, others desperate, as Sterling Corp's chaos rippled outward. Amelia burst into my office, her eyes wide. "Madeline, Horizon's deal is trending on industry forums. People are calling you the supply chain slayer." I laughed, but it was brittle. The nickname felt like a crown I hadn't asked for. Everyone pushed me higher, but the higher I climbed, the more I felt Vivian's shadow looming. Was I her weapon or her rival? I couldn't shake the unease, but I couldn't stop either, not when Lucas was still swinging. I needed a knockout blow, something Lucas couldn't dodge. I dug through the files Vivian had given me at the Sterling room, focusing on the email chain between Lucas and Peakpulse CFO, a nervous guy named Greg Walsh. The email showed Lucas trying to buy Peakpulse through offshore proxies, a move to inflate Sterling Corp's stock before cashing out. It was sloppy. His name was on a notarized proxy, misspelled as Ethan. I could almost hear Dad's voice. "Careless people break things, Madeline. Don't be one of them." I wasn't. I called my attorney, Michelle Torres, a Chicago native with a reputation for dismantling corporate egos. "We've got him," she said, scanning the files. "This isn't just unethical, it's fraud." I spent the next 2 days prepping with Michelle, my nerves fraying, but my resolve ironclad. I thought of Tom, grading papers at our kitchen table, telling me, "You're stronger than their games, Madeline." I thought of Amelia, who'd stayed late to crunch data, her loyalty a reminder of why I fought. By Wednesday, we had a dossier, emails, stock transfer drafts, and a timeline proving Lucas's scheme predated my buyout. It was a guillotine wrapped in legalese. When Vivian texted, "Board meeting tomorrow. Bring the thunder." I felt a chill. She knew too much, too fast. Was she feeding me intel or steering me into a trap? The night before the meeting, I stood on our balcony, the Chicago wind whipping my hair. I felt like I was standing on a cliff, victory in sight, but the ground unsteady. I'd spent years proving I belonged in rooms like Sterling Corp's boardroom, but now I was walking in to burn it down. I thought of Mom, counting pennies to keep our lights on, and Dad, driving through blizzards to feed us. This wasn't just about me, it was about every underdog who'd been called excess baggage. As I clutched the dossier, my heart pounded with equal parts fear and fire. Lucas thought he'd buried me, but tomorrow, I'd show him I was the one holding the shovel. The boardroom at Sterling Corp's Willis Tower office felt like a courtroom, all polished wood and cold silence. I walked in with Michelle at my side, her slate gray suit as sharp as her reputation. The board's 7 men and 2 women, all in their 50s and 60s, watched me like I was a defendant, not a director who'd saved their margins for a decade. Lucas sat at the head, his tie too tight, his smirk faltering. Richard Caldwell, his father, was at the far end, his face unreadable. My heart hammered, but I kept my chin up, channeling Dad's grit. This was my moment, and I wasn't here to beg. Michelle handed out black folders, each one a ticking bomb. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice cutting through the tension, "we're here to address Mr. Caldwell's allegations of malicious interference. Let's start with the facts." She opened her folder, revealing emails, stock transfers, and a notarized proxy with Lucas's name, misspelled but damning. The room stilled as she laid out his plan to secretly acquire Peakpulse, inflate Sterling Corp's value, and cash out, all while defrauding his own board. I watched Lucas's face go from smug to scarlet, his throat bobbing like a fish on a hook. "This is out of context," he stammered. I was exploring options. "You were stealing from your own company," I cut in, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "You called me excess baggage, Lucas, but you're the one gutting this place for a quick buck. I bought Peakpulse to survive your attack. You made it a war when you tried to erase me." The board's eyes shifted, some to Lucas, some to Richard. I felt their judgment, but also their curiosity. I'd been invisible to them for years, a logistics nerd in a silk blouse. Now I was undeniable. Richard leaned forward, removing his glasses. "Madeline, did you orchestrate this?" His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "No," I said. "Lucas did. I just played better." A long silence followed, heavy with the weight of truth. Then Richard turned to his son. Lucas, step outside. His tone was final, like a judge's gavel. Lucas glared at me, his face a cracked mask of entitlement, and stormed out. Richard's gaze met mine. What do you want? I leaned in, my voice low but firm. A clean break. Sterling Corp severs all ties with Peak Pulse, publicly. And Lucas's resignation, in writing. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. You've left me little choice. As I left the tower, Chicago's skyline gleaming under a gray sky, I felt a rush of triumph laced with unease. I'd won, but Vivian's role gnawed at me. Her intel had been too perfect, her timing too precise. I'd buried Lucas, but had I just handed her the keys to a bigger game? My hands trembled as I gripped my purse, the victory bittersweet. I'd fought for my place, for Dad's legacy, for every late night I'd given this company. But as I stepped into the elevator, I wondered if the real battle was just beginning. 2 days later, the news broke. Lucas Caldwell resigns from Sterling Corp to pursue new opportunities. The press release was sterile, no mention of lawsuits or Peak Pulse, just corporate jargon to mask the truth. I should have been celebrating, popping champagne with Tom, watching LinkedIn light up with girl boss posts. Instead, I sat in my car outside the Cook County Courthouse, staring at my dashboard, my victory hollow. Something felt off. Lucas was careless, sure, but not this reckless. Those notarized proxies, the leaked emails, too neat, too convenient. Then my phone buzzed. A voicemail from an unknown number. Vivian's voice, low and confessional. Madeline, if you're hearing this, I'm already gone. Sterling Corp was mine before Richard stole it. I needed a pawn, and Lucas was perfect. You got your empire, now walk away. My blood ran cold. Vivian hadn't just helped me, she'd used me. Every text, every photo, every whispered tip was part of her symphony, with me as the loudest note. She'd orchestrated Lucas's fall to reclaim her legacy, and I'd been her match, igniting the blaze. I drove to the Sterling room, hoping to confront her, but it was closed, the windows dark. Taped to the door was an envelope with my name in blue ink. Inside, a notarized transfer, 12% of Peak Pulse, hers to me, giving me 63% ownership. No note, no trace. Vivian had vanished, no social media, no burner phone, not even a whisper in the industry. She'd burned her bridges and left me the throne. For 3 weeks, I threw myself into Peak Pulse. Clients who'd once ignored me begged for contracts. I automated routing, cut losses by 10%, and hired Amelia as my deputy director. She brought half of Sterling Corp's logistics team with her, all smiling as they jumped ship. The empire was mine, but every win tasted like ash. I kept seeing Vivian's face, her cold smile, and that photo she'd left in the final envelope, her in a hospital bed, holding a newborn Lucas, her eyes soft but haunted. A letter was tucked beside it. Madeline, you were meant to lead. I broke bones to get here, mine, his, yours. Don't become me. I sat in my office until dawn, the photo in my hand, my heart heavy with ghosts. Monday, I walked into Peak Pulse boardroom. No lawyers, no allies, just me. The execs watched, wary but curious. I pulled up our quarterly report and looked each one in the eye. I'm not here to play queen, I said. I'm here to build something no one can tear down. Not a man, not a grudge, not a ghost. They nodded, and the room was mine, not inherited, earned. Somewhere, I hoped Vivian saw it, not as a victory, but as a promise kept. I'd taken her empire, but I'd build it my way, for Dad, for Mom, for every underdog who'd ever been called excess. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through betrayal, battles, and hard-won triumphs. If my story hit you, hit that subscribe button and join us, where every shipment tells a tale of grit, heart, and new beginnings. Keep carving your own path, and I'll meet you at the finish line.